Well, I guess when you feel close to
Just
some
back
people,
a little bit.
like they're there in the room with you, maybe.
Okay, we're live, everyone. Bear with me for a second. I'm gonna get my camera on here. Shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom. I'm Brother Doug, as always. I'm gonna try to set up microphone here. There we go. Hope everyone's having a great Shabbat evening. We are the Wakened by Yahuwah Assembly and Yahuwah Almighty Yahushua Messiah. I'm Brother Doug, as always. My mom, Sister Sharon's right next to me. We have Sister Shoshana and Brother Dennis and Sister Marissa. So we are going to be going back to the study. No. And that we've been doing a couple of weeks ago. We kind of took a break on this type of study. Let me just get that out of the background there. There we go. So this study is called Areas the Septuagint, or I should agrees with the Samaritan Torah, Vulgate, Peshitta, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So these we're pretty much up to part 7 now. So if you guys haven't came across this until tonight, I really recommend you guys go back and watch all 6 parts before this part tonight, just to get some context of what we're going to be reading. So part 7, here we go. We're going to start in Exodus 6 here. So just bear with me, guys. I had reset up my laptop recently, so it's not going to have all of the modules. But actually, let me see. I think I might actually have my Word software set up. So let me see. It might be easier for me to use that. Okay. 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 All right. Let's see here. Uh, you know what? Actually, let me try this. See what happens. Yeah, I think that's where I have them. Okay. Yeah. So these at least will be able to. Okay. So actually, you know what? We're gonna have to use eSword then. No big deal. So with let me see here. I'm gonna just see there's could have swore the Catholic public domain version was on here. I guess not. Um, I'm definitely gonna need that at some point. All right, so I got the ISR 2009. Yeah, I must have to get that from a. I actually want to see. I could have swore though that that was built into it. Okay. Either way, we're gonna try our best here. I'm gonna try to see here. Okay, let me see here how to do this. If I remember how to do this, what I might do is this is gonna be unintentional for me to set this up real quick for you guys. This is gonna be like an unintentional tutorial here. Um, let's see here. Where I got my files. No. Okay. See, some of these are EXEs, so when you refresh your computer, you're going to have to reinstall some of these. Okay, yeah. Where's the Catholic public domain version? Could have swore I had this on here. That really sucks. Okay. Um, all right. Okay, so what I'll have to do for you guys, and I apologize, I won't be able to put the scriptures on shared screen. What I'm going to be doing is I'll have the document on the shared screen at least, and I'll be reading them off, and I'll be just kind of listing them off from my sort on my Android here. So here we go. So we're starting with what? Let me see here. I think it's Exodus 6:12. I apologize everyone for that. Okay. Um, Okay, so we see here in the LXX and the Ankylos both say hard of speech or ineloquent, which, according to the context you're going to see here, makes a lot more sense. Um, Mom, first read your version, what it
Okay.
says.
I'm sorry, what was the scripture?
Exodus chapter 6, verse 12.
Oh, right, here I am. Okay. Let's see. Then Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country."
Okay, so I don't think that's the right verse.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
Where does it say I am a hard of speech or it'll say uncircum? Where does
Wait a minute. Did I read 10? Yeah, my eyes were.
Whoops.
Wait, I read something else. I don't know. Let me see here. 12, you said, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I read the verse before it. But Moshe said to Yahuwah, "If the Israelites will not listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips?"
All right. Yep. So faltering lips is a nice way of putting uncircumcised lips. Now the Targum of Onkelos says, Masha spoke to before Yahuwah, saying, "Behold, the sons of Yasharel have not received from me. How then will Pharaoh receive an eye so heavy of speech?" So the Targums of heavy speech, which would more agree with the Septuagint, which says um ineloquent. Okay, so it's going to say here, and Masha said before Yahuwah, saying, "Behold, the children of Yasharel hearken not to me. How shall Pharaoh hearken to me if I am, and I am not eloquent?" Meaning he's not a good public speaker.
Right.
That's what he's actually saying, rather than I got uncircumcised lips and I'm just, I have sinful lips or what have it. So the problem with here is this is a different context than the verse from Isaiah where people always quote from and say, well, Isaiah says I'm a man of uncircumcised lips. But yeah, that's a different story. Isaiah in that moment realized how sinful he was in the physical presence in heaven of Yahuwah in his throne room. That was the context of that. This is a completely different context. Masha's not worried about his sin at this moment. He's more worried about how am I going to speak to these guys? Like, I'm nervous. I'm not a good speaker.
Yeah.
That's the context. So the Septuagint and the Targum Onkelos say hard of speech or ineloquent, which agrees more with the context of the situation. Okay, so that's that verse. Now we're going to chapter 6, verse 20. This is another interesting one here, is we have Miriam omitted from the quote unquote from the um genealogy of her family. So this is a bigger issue here. It says here, read your version, Mom, in Exodus 6:20.
Okay.
Chapter 6, verse 20.
Yeah. Okay. Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moshe. Amram lived 137 years. Yeah, I never noticed that before, where Miriam was completely left out.
Yeah, the Septuagint says in that middle part of the paragraph, it says, "Bore to him both Aaron and Moses and Miriam their sister. And the years of life of Amram were 132 years." Now you said 137 or 32?
Yeah, 37.
So now we have a difference of 5 years in the genealogy of Amram, and Miriam left out. So you have a bigger issue there.
What reason would they have of leaving Miriam out?
Maybe because she's a woman, they feel she's not important.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
These are rabbis here.
That could be. It could be.
Trying to think like a rabbi here. Why would they leave her out?
But even when it's concerning, I was just reading ahead before we started this, concerning Simeon. I mean, even the son of a Canaanite woman
Yeah.
was included
Yeah.
in that verse, so that's interesting.
Yeah. The only two versions that kept Miriam in there is the Septuagint and the Samaritan Torah, which is roughly goes back to 100 BC. So anything later than 200 or 100 BC has taken her out. So the majority of the manuscripts actually don't have her in there in that verse. Let's see here. So again, I don't think we need to rehash verse 30 here. It's the same thing again. The Masoretic says, uncircumcised lips, which again makes no sense with the context. The Septuagint and Targum Onkelos again say unable to speak or heavy of speech, again makes more sense. Now, to be fair, this is kind of cheating here. Now we're at the book of Psalms. It's kind of cheating. I'll tell you why. Give you a little bit of history, guys, about the Vulgate. If you guys don't know much about the Vulgate, I'm pretty sure a lot of us don't because we're not educated on this in church. They don't want us to know about other manuscripts predating the Masoretic. The Vulgate actually uses the Septuagint version of Psalms. So some people are going to accuse me of cheating here, that you have the Vulgate and the Septuagint agreeing in Psalms over the Masoretic. But just to explain here, the reason why it's identical in Psalms 22, verse 1 is because St. Jerome used the Vulgate, not the Vulgate, other way around. St. Jerome used the Septuagint for the Psalms version of the Latin Vulgate. So, for the most part, if you have a Catholic Bible and you're reading Psalms in a Catholic Bible, you're reading a Septuagint version of Psalms, a Greek source for Psalms, essentially. So that's why it's word for word the same. So, for the end concerning the morning aid or tasks is what it would say. Now, according to the Masoretic version of Psalms 22:1, the intro would say a little bit something different. Hold on. Let me go to the ISR here, for example. Oh, yeah. Never mind. ISR doesn't keep this. ISR, why do you do that? All right. Here we go. King James. To the chief musician upon the Aleph Shahar. Okay. So I'm assuming that the Masoretic version is talking about this is a specific song for the chief musician to sing using a specific instrument, the Aleph Shahar. So it's a little bit different than the Vulgate / Septuagint version of Psalms, which just says for the end concerning the morning aid, like Yahuwah helping in the morning, like Yahuwah rescuing. So in the context, it would say, for the end concerning the morning aid, a Psalm of Daoud. So that is the difference there. But again, I know some people are going to say, Doug, you're cheating because the Vulgate just uses the Septuagint, so it's like you're reading the same version twice. I know some people are going to say that, but anyways, moving on. Psalms 24, verse 1. LXX Vulgate say one of the Sabbaths in Psalms 24, verse 1. So the Latin Vulgate version of Psalms, which again is translated from the Septuagint, it's the same thing as the Septuagint version of the book of Psalms. It's saying that this particular psalm was composed for the Sabbath, for one of the Sabbaths, is what it's saying. So if I go to there, it would say a psalm for Daoud on one of the Sabbaths. The earth is Yahuwah's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell in it. So again, that's a difference there. Now we're up to the book of Exodus. We're back to the book of Exodus here, chapter 12, verse 37. LXX and the Samaritan Pentateuch seem somewhat to agree over the Masoretic, where the Masoretic says besides the children, right? The Septuagint says besides the belongings or baggage. And the Samaritan Pentateuch agrees more with the Septuagint because it says besides the livestock. livestock would be possessions. They're farmers. That's their possessions. So essentially the Samaritan Pentateuch and the LXX either are saying their belongings or more specifically their livestock. And the Masoretic text is not mentioning livestock, it's mentioning besides their children, which doesn't make sense because the children would be included with, the amount of people that are, coming out of Egypt. So it kind of doesn't make much sense the way it's worded in the Masoretic. And I'll show you what I mean. Exodus 12:37. And the children of Yashel departed from Ramesses to Succoth to the full number to 600,000 footmen, even men, besides the baggage. So obviously the 600,000 is including children. That's how the Septuagint reads it. Now, the Masoretic, no matter what version you have, is going to say, no matter what translation you have, it's going to say 600,000 on foot that were men besides children. So this would have you believe it's more than 600,000 because they're saying besides the children, meaning like not including the children. So you see the difference there? The Septuagint says baggage. Huge difference. And a second witness in the Samaritan Torah says even very much cattle. Possessions, cattle. So the problem is that the Masoretic, rather than cattle or possessions, is saying children there. So then you would have more than 600,000 people. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, there was more than 600,000.
Well, no, the Masoretic is saying that.
Oh, okay.
According to the Septuagint, the children would be included with that 600,000.
Oh, wow.
Because baggage versus children. So one is saying baggage or livestock, then the other is saying children besides children. So if you read the Masoretic a certain way, you would assume that the Masoretic is claiming there was more than 600,000 people. Because,
yeah, I always thought that because I always thought the women and the children, there's probably more than 1 million.
Yeah.
By the total count.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of controversial there. So you have another historical, possibly revisioned history there by the Masoretic text. So Exodus 12:47 and or 48, depending on what version you're looking at. It might be verse 47 or 48. And it says here, the LXX Septuagint and the Targum Onkelos both say proselytes. Now, let me explain to you what a proselyte is. A proselyte would be a sojourner who became a Hebrew, who grafted in, a stranger that became grafted in. So the Septuagint actually makes distinction. They don't consider strangers who join themselves to Yahuwah like really strangers. They don't consider that a stranger. So this is a kind of a what do you call a very what's the word? The word I just used before. Not conspiratorial, but it's a touchy issue in this walk because some people believe that it should just say stranger every time. I'm on the side of the Septuagint that proselyte's not the same thing as a regular stranger. Not all strangers are the same. You have a stranger that's joined to Yahuwah, then you have other strangers that passed by. So I actually agree with the Septuagint using the word proselyte here, and I'm just going to explain to you the difference here in the context of the verse here. So we look here, it says in the Septuagint here, it says, okay, and if a proselyte, mind you, is talking about the Passover, okay, this is why I believe it shouldn't just say stranger. This is talking about someone who would really become part of Yahuwah's household that was a stranger, that was a Gentile, but now is near to him. And if a proselyte shall come to you to keep the Passover to Yahuwah, you shall circumcise every male of him. And then shall he approach to sacrifice, and he shall be even as original inhabitant of the land. No uncircumcised person shall eat of it. A lot of people will say this is wrong, dog. It should just say stranger. But think about it. would Yahuwah allow a Gentile who's not joined to him eat of the Passover? Think about it. No.
Mm-mm.
Unbelievers are not allowed to.
No.
Hence why the Septuagint translator used the Greek word proselyte.
Mm-hmm.
What is a proselyte? A convert.
Mm-hmm.
It is a Gentile heathen, Gentile-born person who comes into covenant with the Most High. That is a proselyte. Now, you got to understand what Judaism today calls a proselyte is not what the Septuagint translators identified as a proselyte, because I know a lot of people have this term, proselyte. The problem with this term is they've learned a Christianese or a Judaism understanding of the word proselyte. Proselyte just means that you have become a Hebrew, basically, essentially, in scripture. It would mean you're now part of Israel. Even though you were born a stranger, born a Gentile, you're no longer of that spiritual identity. You're no longer, there were strangers that just passed by in the land of Israel. They stayed pagans. They stayed strangers. They did not join themselves to Israel. So this is where I agree. And I don't agree every time proselyte is used in the Septuagint. Sometimes it gets confusing. Like in prophecy, it will say, like, the tribe of the proselytes in the book of Ezekiel, that gets kind of weird. But this case, referring to the Passover, who can take a part of the Passover, it makes perfect sense to me. It's a stranger that joined themselves to Yahuwah, that got circumcised, that took part of his covenant, hence the word proselyte. So you can't have a regular stranger that now is getting circumcised without them leaving behind their pagan life. You know what I'm saying? So you can't have it both ways. If that stranger is about to get circumcised to eat the Passover, they're no longer in Yahuwah's eyes a stranger. They're no longer out of covenant, if you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, okay, Exodus 15:23. Okay. Vulgate and the Septuagint of Exodus say bitterness. Okay. So Exodus 15:23. And they came to Marah and could not drink Marah, for it was bitter. Therefore, he named the name of the place bitterness. So this is an interesting difference here because much of the Vulgate, in certain portions of the Vulgate, were translated from a Hebrew text, not a Greek text. So for the Vulgate to agree with the Septuagint in the Torah, it's showing that a much earlier Hebrew text than the Masoretic we have today agreed with the Septuagint in certain cases, and this is one of them. Instead of using the word Mara, it's using bitterness. It's calling it bitterness instead of Mara, which that's what it means. But the point is, it's choosing to do a thought for thought translation, which is what the Septuagint does. So it's kind of interesting because one of the accusations you'll see people out there that are anti-Septuagint will say, "Oh, dog, well, there's Hellenism in the Septuagint." And I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. I'm just being honest. These are the arguments, the ridiculous arguments, those that just have unnatural hatred for the Greek language. They'll just make up stuff like that. Oh, well, there's Hellenism in the Septuagint. If you're going to say that, then you have to say there's Hellenism in the Vulgate, which, by the way, was translated. Certain books of the Vulgate were translated by a Hebrew text, not the Septuagint. So now you would have to say that much earlier Hebrew manuscripts that the Vulgate used somewhere around the 3rd century AD versus 1000 AD. Okay, somehow that there's Hellenism in that thing. So it gets very convoluted when people start making excuses like that. It's fine if you don't want if you choose not to use the Septuagint, it's fine, but using a strongman argument like that is ridiculous because then you got to accuse the Catholic Bibles of the same thing. Because the Vulgate is literally agreeing word for word with the Septuagint in this verse. And like I said, the Torah of the Vulgate comes from a Hebrew text. And for those that want the proof of it, I can give you guys tons of articles I can link on Latin Vulgate, where it comes from, what Jerome used to translate it into Latin, if you guys are interested. So I can give you guys factual evidence, historical evidence that that's the case. So anyway, so moving on. All right. Exodus 19:16. And it came to pass on the third day, as the morning drew near, there were voices, lightnings, dark cloud on Mount Sinai. The voice of the trumpet sounded loud, and all the people in the camp trembled. Now, the only real difference we have here mainly is not really a legitimate difference, is more of a difference of interpretation when you talk about the Hebrew language. So the Masoretic rite says shofar. The Hebrew there would say shofar for trumpet. So what people will claim is that it should be ram's horn. So they say, oh, well, actually they were blowing a ram's horn, yada, yada, yada. But there's no proof historically that that's what that word actually meant. Number one. Number two, when you compare the LXX to the Masoretic text, the LXX says trumpet. Salpinx is the Greek word, and it does not mean ram's horn. So right there debunks that. Secondly, the Latin Vulgate is translated as trumpet. Okay. So again, the Vulgate was based on an earlier Hebrew than the Masoretic text. So even if those out there, you guys, you know who you are, that want to claim that shofar means ram's horn and all that, even if that's the case, you have two much earlier manuscripts from two various different languages, one from a Hebrew source, one from a Greek source, that is showing that it should be trumpet, not ram's horn. So that's fine if you want to believe shofar means ram's horn. I don't see any conclusive evidence historically or from the Strong's Concordance that that is a definite article what that word means. So anyway, I think personally a lot of translators are biased and they see the word curved horn in the Strong's Concordance and they run with that. They see the word curved horn and they think, oh, that's a horn of an animal, but that's not the case. You can cornets were curved. That so to me that's not proof of anything. So anyway, last cross reference we have here. Psalms 29 verse 1, LXX. LXX and Vulgate say solemn assembly or completion of the tabernacle. Now, Mom, what does yours say in Psalms 29:1? Yep, go ahead, take your time. Psalms 29:1.
Okay. Ascribe to Yahuwah, O mighty ones. Ascribe to Yahuwah esteem and strength. Did I read the right thing?
So
191.
there's no introduction there?
It just says a Psalm of David.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what I was looking for. Okay. So it just says a Psalm of David. That's interesting. So it leaves out on the occasion of the solemn assembly of the tabernacle. So that's talking about when they would call solemn assemblies, they would go to the temple of their tabernacle. The Vulgate as well doesn't have exactly the same, and I kind of wonder if the Vulgate deviated from the Septuagint and went to a Hebrew text here because it has part of that introduction, but not the full thing. It says a Psalm of David at the completion of the tabernacle. So there's solemn assembly missing. So I'm kind of wondering if they went to some type of Hebrew text. If they did, then that's proof that the Septuagint is the more genuine version because the Hebrew text of Jerome's day would have been used to translate the Vulgate. So if he's not using the Septuagint, and he's using the Hebrew text. That Hebrew text Jerome used right here is saying something a lot similar to the Septuagint than the Masoretic. The Masoretic leaves it all out. So to me, that's interesting. But as far as I know, he used the Septuagint for the whole book of Psalms. So as far as I know, that shouldn't be the case. But anyway, and like I said, guys, I'm gonna leave you guys with the links so you can research this into yourself. It's pretty interesting about the Vulgate. It's like a hybrid type of manuscript, and there is a lot of resources you can find on this. And like I said, it is the latest it was 4th century AD. So even this manuscript is very is much older than the Masoretic text, which would have been about 700 or so years later. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to try to find something from the Encyclopedia Britannica here. Here we go, Vulgate. So just to give you guys a little history lesson, who are willing, I want to do a similar video to the short video I did about the other manuscripts to go more deep into this Vulgate. But since we have a little extra time here, maybe extra 5-10 minutes here, I just want to kind of skim through here for the viewers and listeners just to give them a decent idea of what the Vulgate is. So from Latin, common version is what it means. Okay, Vulgata. Latin Bible used by the Roman Catholic Church, primarily translated by Saint Jerome in 382 AD. Pope Damascus commissioned Jerome, the leading biblical scholar of his day, to produce an acceptable Latin version of the Bible, from various translations being used. He revised Latin translation of the Gospels according to 383. Whoops, my bad, guys. Let me backtrack there. So 383, using the Septuagint Greek version of the Old Testament, he produced Latin versions of the Psalms. He did not use the Septuagint for the whole Bible. He used it for the Psalms. So Galatian Psalter, the book of Job. Okay, so Job is supposed to be the LXX Job in the Catholic Bible. Okay, and some other books. Later, he decided this is what I mean by it became a hybrid version. Later, he decided that the Septuagint was unsatisfactory and began translating the entire Old Testament from the original Hebrew versions, a process that he completed about 405 AD. So that would be what, 5th century AD? So you still have it about still near 700 years prior to the Masoretic. Still. So still a lot older. Jerome's translation was not immediately accepted, but from the mid-6th century on, 600 AD on, or 700 AD, I guess, a complete Bible with all separate books bound in a single cover was commonly used. It usually contained Jerome's Old Testament translation from the Hebrew, except from Psalms, his Galatian Psalter, his translation of the books of Tobit, Judith, Apocryphal, and Jewish and Protestant canons, and his revision of the Gospels. The remainder of the New Testament was taken from older Latin versions, which may have slightly been revised by Jerome. Certain other books found in the Septuagint, the Apocrypha for Protestants and Jews, the Deuterocanonical books for the Roman Catholics were included from older versions. So that is the Vulgate. It's like part Greek sourced, part Hebrew sourced. It's an amalgamation of different manuscripts. Now, so according to this, though, he did solely use the Septuagint for Psalms. So it's kind of interesting that verse from Psalms 29:1 differs a little bit from the Bretons. So I want to look more into that. But anyway, so you guys get a decent idea about the Vulgate and why I use it as a reference sometimes. I don't usually use it for the New Testament, mainly because when Jerome was like revising the New Testament, it's been very well known that he was trying to change doctrine in the New Testament part of the Vulgate. Like, Mom, what was one of the things he tried to fix? He tried to make it so that Yahusha did not have any brothers and sisters.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm not surprised that he did that because that's a
Supposedly,
hell
people
of a-
claim the Vulgate changes certain verses to where James and Jude would be his cousins instead of his brothers.
Yeah.
Because they believe in the whole, the Catholics, they believe in the whole eternal Virgin Mary, perpetual virgin, and all that. So that's why I don't really trust the Vulgate New Testament wholly. I kind of use it as a reference if I do. I don't use it as my main New Testament I read from on my daily readings. I can't fully trust it 110%, because I know the Catholics wanted to change certain things about the New Testament to fit with their doctrine. So, anyway, but just to explain to you guys anyway that as far as the Tanakh is concerned, the Vulgate is a lot more accurate, because it's using certain books. Like according to that article in Encyclopedia Britannica, he used the LXX for the Book of Job. He used the LXX for the Book of Psalms, and he also used a much earlier Hebrew text for the Torah and for the rest of the Old Testament. Now, according to some forums I've seen online, if you guys are interested, I can send you links to those forums on Quora, I think is one of the websites, where one of the guys that researched the Vulgate claimed that that the Hebrew text he would have used would have been just a little bit younger than the original Septuagint. So the Hebrew text Jerome would have used would have been maybe as early as almost like 100 AD, like somewhere around there, like first century. That it would have been as old as that. So anyway, if you guys want to know more about that, feel free to reach out to the ministry. Have a great rest of your Shabbat, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To all our brothers and sisters in Yahuwah Almighty, Yahushua Messiah. Yahuwah willing, see you guys tomorrow. And Shalom.